Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go.
So welcome to Eating at a Meeting. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your host. Every July, I like to focus on celebrating freedom and independence. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means today. 2 weeks ago, I had more on the show talking about our experience and what at the PCMA EduCon convention up in Detroit. And we talked about that event specifically, but we also just talked about what we need to educate our staff, our attendees, and staff on the catering side about managing dietary restrictions. And then last week, the podcast was actually a webinar for Meetings and Conventions magazine or North Star Meetings Group. And so today I really want to come back to the whole focus of independence and freedom and what that means for us as meeting professionals, as well as diners at events, as well as the catering teams. And I've been really focused on this for as long as I can remember. And so I want to share with you what I think celebrating independence and freedom means when we're at an event and how we can help our attendees do that. And part of it comes from a conversation or a question that was actually asked last week during the webinar. How do we help our attendees who are blind or visually impaired attend our events? And so one of the things that I repeat quite often in all of my speeches is that it's not just about what's on the plate, but it's how do we get to the plate? Or how do we allow our attendees to get to the plate? Can they reach the plate? And so when we're thinking about freedom and independence, think about how when you go to a conference, if you don't have any kind of disability or if you don't have any kind of dietary need, you have this freedom to go about getting there and eating whatever you want. Right. And so you can eat every single dish on the buffet, or you don't have to pick around and find food on your plate or scoot food away on your plate because you can eat it all. And when you're going from, say, the general session room to the dining area, wherever the food and beverage is being set up, that reception or that outdoor pool party, you can just go the route that the hotel or the venue suggests that you go, taking the stairs or taking the escalators and not going behind the scenes back of house to get to that venue. And I think that's really important as meeting professionals and as our catering partners who own those venues to think through all of those steps, because we need to make sure that every single one of our attendees has that ability to be able to get to the plate and to actually participate and eat in that food and beverage. And actually, I was talking to a client the other day and they're like, hey, is that person who is blind who's coming to our convention? And they went back and checked at registrations to make sure that he had actually not registered for this year's event. And I had a woman at an event that I planned 2 months ago. She is Orthodox Jew, and so she has to eat a specific way to following the kosher dietary practices. And this year she didn't come because she was actually having a baby. So making sure that when we're thinking through or we know previous guests are coming, do we have the things that they need to feel independent and to independently attend our event with freedom of getting through those spaces and those meals? So let's talk about some ways that we can provide some independence. And one is with signage. Adia, I'm glad you're taking a break. Listen to me chat for a few minutes. Thank you. Thinking through what we need to do to provide that independence. And at the PCMA EduCon, they had some really good signage. I think it was Sodexo Live was the caterer, and they had some good signage that labeled, this is gluten-free. And I'll see if I can find a photo of that. the really big signage to point it out and to make sure that people understood which items were gluten-free and what items contained what. And that's really, really important to making sure that people can read the labels, they understand what's in the labels, but also being able to ask questions. And Tess and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but we loved the fact that it was labeled that it was halal chicken, it was gluten-free, and it was nut-free. This was actually at the very beginning of the buffet, right? And so they could see what was on the entire buffet before they walked down the buffet. And so they had a clear idea if somebody could actually eat it if they needed or skip that buffet line. Let me find the little button here. And then when you got to the specific items, it was also labeled. And I love how this labeling, it's clear, it's nice and bold. The title of the food is bold. Then it actually explains what's in it. And then it says it's vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free. I love the fact that the vegan, the gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free is in a different color. That's really important in helping make sure that people can see that information. I need to go back in and check the guidelines for people who are visually impaired on the coloring of those, what colors are best to use when you're thinking about that. But I do like the fact that it is red versus the black, and it's not blue, because blue would not stand out very well. So that is one of the ways that we can help provide some support and freedom for attendees to be able to eat when they're walking through a buffet. And then also the making sure that the servers understand what they're serving. And so they had this really big, tall sign on this buffet, which is really nice. It called it out from across the room that you could see that. The one challenge that somebody pointed out is that for safety purposes, they're hesitant to call this actually gluten-free because it's actually not certified gluten-free. It's not in a prepackaged. It actually is on a table with other non-gluten-free food. So for somebody who has celiac, these 9 muffins right here, these are the ones that are gluten-free. But just knowing how individuals take these tongs and use them to pick up this type of bread and then maybe use it to pick up this bread. It is nice that these gluten-free muffins actually have a wrapper around them so the tongs would not actually be touching the gluten or the gluten-free muffin. But also if somebody has a wheat allergy that's on contact or such, that might become an issue. So maybe that person who's eating gluten-free is picking up that muffin directly without using the tongs. So I love this sign, and I don't want it to be placed way far away to make people walk a further distance away to go get that food. I do like it here, but maybe those gluten-free muffins would be put on the other side of the fruit plate right here, right? So put them on the other side of that platter so that potential contamination from the pastries filled with gluten does not happen with those gluten-free items. And we do need to chat when we're talking to our individuals that are celiac disease. If somebody does say they're celiac, or if they just say they're dairy and gluten-free or gluten-free, I would ask them, are you celiac? How comfortable are you eating off of a buffet? Ask those questions. Same questions that you need to ask somebody who says that they're kosher or halal. How comfortable are you eating off of a buffet if we tell you that all of the meat is halal certified? Or if you're not Orthodox Jew, are you comfortable eating off the buffet if everything is labeled with the pork and the shellfish and the meat and the dairy? What kind of options do we have? Those are good questions to ask. But then also making sure, a friend of mine pointed out when showing some of these pictures of the buffets that they weren't necessarily accessible for somebody who utilizes a wheelchair or is visually impaired and needs help walking through the buffet. I did appreciate that at PCMA, there was a server at every single buffet station that was there to help or answer questions. And they were quite knowledgeable on what they were serving. So when you're thinking about the design of your food and beverage and how that is being displayed on the buffet, this is the banquet captain is taking a picture of me here. But my chair was a wheelchair. The food on the top of that buffet is the gluten-free food. I can't reach that gluten-free food. So is there a server there to help you get that food? Is there someone, figuring it out? Can you put that food? I do appreciate that the gluten-free croissants are on the top shelf, so that being on the bottom shelf, they would be contaminated by non-gluten-free food. So it does protect that from crumbs coming down onto it. But again, we have to think through the access of that and making sure that all of our attendees can reach the food as well. And so there is that. And I'm going to go over here now. Before we even get to any of that, Alex, the cauliflower churromoir was delicious. It just doesn't sound just delicious. It was delicious. So thank you for pointing that out. And thank you for the happy belated birthday to me too. But when we're trying to provide food independence, some of the things that we need to think through on this thing is that we need to be asking our attendees if they have dietary restrictions. And I pointed this out last week in our webinar with North Star, is that if you think you don't have anybody with dietary restrictions, or you're not going to do it and they can just figure it out when we get there, you're actually wreaking havoc on the catering team. Because, well, you apparently don't know, but the catering team does know that you're going to have people with dietary restrictions. And if you haven't thought through those dietary restrictions when you're planning your menus, then you're really going to wreak havoc on those guests, as well as your catering partners on the back end, because they're not necessarily going to plan for gluten-free and dairy-free and vegan and vegetarian and have you thought through how many of those that you need. But by asking your attendees up front what dietary needs they have, then you're preparing the chef, you're preparing yourself, and you're preparing them to be able to accommodate them. And I do want to say that when you ask them, you need to be able to follow up on it. And you need to accept the fact that not everybody, when you're picking those menus, not everybody eats the same way you do. And I don't need you to put a buffet out that's got 50 different items on it, because you're not going to nobody's going to eat all that food. But I do need you to then think through how you're designing that menu. Say, do you have gluten-free? Do you have vegan options? One of the things that I do when I work with my clients is I take that menu, say it's the taco bar, right? Buffet, right? I sort all of the items. I line item every single thing, food item on that buffet out. And then on the right-hand side, I actually then filter it. And how many items are vegan? How many items are gluten-free? How many items are vegetarian? How many items are gluten-free and dairy-free? And you will come to find out that sometimes there's not very many things to do. And actually on a buffet that I went to, that was mostly a Mexican buffet, the only thing that was vegan and gluten-free on the menu was the guacamole. They had put some spices on the chips. They had added something into the meat or into the chicken. So you have to ask those questions of your catering team. What are the ingredients in those items? You might not know, because I'll give you an example. IHOP puts their pancake batter in their scrambled eggs. So that is now adding wheat and other things to their scrambled eggs. That makes that not gluten-free for somebody who wants to eat some scrambled eggs. So there are some tricks and tips that chefs do in the back of the house to make their food look fluffy, or make their food have the specific consistency they have, that you have no idea what that is. And so you have to ask your catering teams about that. So under the word ask, you're asking your attendees if they have dietary restrictions. And then you're asking your catering partners, what are the ingredients in the food that they make? Because not everybody eats the same way, and not everybody makes the same dish the same way. And then going back to that we need to accept that not everybody eats the same as we do. So when we're designing our menus, we're not picking food for us, we're picking food for our attendees. Yes, you want to eat it, but you also need to pick food that's going to feed a large group of people at the same time. We need to learn, the next item in this is that we need to learn how to create items that are free from allergens or offending other people. So get some ideas in your repertoire saying, hey, I know that quinoa is vegan and it's gluten-free, as long as there's not other ingredients added to it, right? So look for items and look for catering partners that can make what is that called? It's the hot brown sandwich from Louisville. And I spoke about that. I used that as an example a couple of weeks ago at PCMA because Louisville was my sponsor of my education session. Is that my friend Martha, are you still on here? Allergy Dragon. The hot brown sandwich is bread and turkey and gravy and tomatoes. And it's a famous Louisville dish. Well, Martha made that free of the top 9 allergens. So she made it so that it was vegan and it was nut free and it was dairy free and it looked the same. I don't have those pictures to show you, but it looked the same. So when we learn to create meals that are free from, that also have the same look and texture and intent with what we wanted that other dish to be, we actually create a better experience for our attendees that allow them to have the freedom of participating equally with everyone else. Incorporate is another word that I like to use. Incorporate or eliminate the needs from the menu altogether. And this comes with an easy example is saying, hey, I'm going to eliminate all nuts. And I did this at an event that happened last month. We had someone who was contact allergic to nuts. So she could not be in a room with nuts because if I ate nuts and I shook her hand, she could actually go into anaphylactic shock, have an allergic reaction. So we eliminated all nuts from our event completely. And the venue came back and said, well, we're not a nut-free environment. And I said, she and I know that, but we need you to make every single thing that we're serving to be nut-free. You can clean that kitchen. You can make that nut-free for that event. And it really helped that we had all of the meeting space, but you can have that done. But you do need to make sure that everyone on the team understands that. And I brought this up in the conversation with Zoe and with last week, I think, with North Star, is that our servers knew it. And when the muffins came out on the very first day for the very first breakfast, 2 of the 4 muffins had nuts in it. But the servers had read their BEO and their BEO said no nuts to be served at all. They removed those pastries, the entire plate of pastries, all 4 pastries, and brought back clean plates with pastries that did not have any nuts on it. So we need to make sure that everybody is in the loop on us incorporating or eliminating any kind of allergen or dietary need from our menus across the board, because we want to make sure that it's a safe environment. So here is a picture of some crudité, and you wouldn't think, right? Crudité. So they're in here, the carrots and the celery are in a cup with the ranch dressing. Well, look at this. It's a vegetable shooter with ranch. It's got carrots and celery sticks and ranch dressing. Well, the ranch contains milk, egg, soy, wheat, and gluten. You wouldn't know that by reading the label. If it just said ranch dressing, you wouldn't know that by just looking at it. So it's really important that we call out or highlight the allergens that are in the food and letting our attendees know that as well. And then we also, because we had individuals who were eating kosher but not orthodox kosher, if I said that correctly or incorrectly, I apologize. But we noted that it was nut free, it was fish free, it was pork free, shellfish, wheat free, and wine free. We had somebody allergic to wine. So we pointed out what the ingredients were in it and what ingredients were not in it. I have this ring thing that has the ingredients of every single item that's being served at that event, right? And that's for the banquet captains to have on hand, and or the servers to have and showcase so they know the full ingredient list to be able to educate the attendees. And it's helpful if anybody has questions about what's in it completely. You may not want to give it to the servers. You may want to give it to your banquet captains so that they can educate and answer questions about what is in the food. So we all need to know what's in the food, even when it's even when it's on the buffet, be able to answer those questions. And a good thing to do as well is to put that information on the event app. And so let's see if I have that picture. I don't know if I have it in there, but putting it on the event app. So just like we had showed that slide from, let's see, go back to Detroit. I love being able to switch through my photos from Detroit, and we're going to say 2024. So when we're looking at this label here, let's pull this back up here. putting this label on the app so that people can read the menu items before they get to the event is great. So and an example of that was if you've got the event app and you have lunch and somebody can click lunch and you've got the menu there so they can actually be prepared when they go to the food and beverage function to participate. And this is quite helpful. But on this menu, I would prefer that we spell out what's in it, the allergens that are in it. And I've mentioned this a couple of times, but it is coming that we do need to label for the top 9 allergens. The state of Colorado, the state Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, state of Pennsylvania have adopted the U.S. food code that says unpackaged food, i.e. a buffet, must label for the top 9 allergens. So, and I'm pointing this out because you've got here mascarpone. Some people might not know what mascarpone is. Well, it's dairy. So we need to say that this contains milk. It says eggs, but we should also say it contains milk. We should also say it contains fish because I know fish is there, but spelling it out as clearly as possible, just like on the side of a wrapper on a prepackaged food. We need to do that same kind of stuff. All right, let's remove this slide here. Provide is another word that I use when I'm trying to help provide independence and freedom, and providing these labels, providing the information about the meals before people get there, providing what you're going to be doing, showcasing on your event website what you're doing, what kind of information you're going to be providing people when they're coming to this event. And then the last one is educate. Oh, actually, no, the one before that is furnish. Furnish your attendees with a way for them to communicate, especially if it's a seated and served meal. Oh, actually, not even. If it's a buffet or a past hors d'oeuvres and you do have options for them, provide them a way to communicate with the servers. These are meal cards that I have designed and sell, but it's easy. It fits in the back of a name badge, and they can hand this to a server. And it says, hey, I've got a tree nut allergy, or I've got a seafood allergy, and I need a personalized plate that's been custom designed for me, right? Or custom designed for a variety of people that have the same need. But furnish them a way to communicate safely and discreetly so they're not yelling, or your server's not yelling, hey, who's the vegan or who's the nut-free person, right? We want to be able to provide that freedom like everybody else, to walk through a buffet, be able to get a meal without any questions, without having to call themselves out. We all go about our daily lives without any excessive need. Like, I can go into the grocery store and buy what I need, right? But can everybody get into that grocery store, right? Can everybody reach the countertop? Is there something for me to drink? Because Kate just popped in here. Is there something for me to drink on that bar? Is there a non-alcoholic version of something? I was in a grocery store yesterday, actually, and I said, hey, what non-alcoholic spirits do you have? And the woman, thankfully, she knew what I was talking about. She didn't walk me to the soda section. She walked me to the spirits and beer section of the grocery store, and she showed me the athletic beer on the counter. She showed me some kombucha, and she showed me some different non-alcoholic spirits that I didn't know any of those brands, but they were more kind of mocktail-y things. Yes, Kate, freedom and independence is really, really important when we're talking about catering and events. And the freedom to be able to walk up to a bar and say, hey, can I have a non-alcoholic spirit or cocktail, right? Without being handed a glass of club soda or a glass of water or a bottle of water, right? Anything like that. So, and having it in a nice glass and being able to fully participate and have the freedom to fully participate without having to go off and find something to eat or drink somewhere else. My friend David actually posted a LinkedIn post a couple of weeks ago where he went to a convention, a meetings industry convention, and he walked in and he had just finished a workout before he got there, and he didn't want to drink. He also didn't want to drink because he was about to network with a bunch of people that he'd never met before, and he wanted to have full cognitive sense about him. And the only non-alcoholic options that they had were soda and water. And so he did a once over in the room to see, if anything intrigued him and anybody he saw intrigued him, and he turned around and walked out. So he went to go find food and beverage elsewhere. So not only he's coming to this event to network, he's coming to this event to land business or to find new business or to help support other people. And he had to leave because they were not supporting him. They were not giving him the freedom and the independence to attend that event fully as themselves and to eat and enjoy as everyone else. And then the last part about all of this is education, which I'm hoping this conversation has helped educate you a little bit today. We need to educate ourselves. We need to educate our event planning team, our clients, our families, our vendors that we hire. And we have to make sure that our servers and our banquet teams understand. And that's the kitchen teams understand too, back of the house, front of the house, and the bartenders, the servers, the banquet captains. Another example actually that I want to bring up about that is an event that I attended a couple of years ago, and the buffet section, so like the tuna tartare and all of those things were labeled clearly, and it says contains nuts or contains sesame and contains fish and things like that. But when you got to the pastry section, to the dessert section, none of those were labeled at all with any kind of ingredients or if they were gluten-free or nut-free or anything. And when I chatted with the pastry chef as well as the executive chef, he's like, oh, well, we didn't communicate that information that he needed. We didn't tell the pastry chef that he needed to label his food. So we need to make sure that we're educating everybody on the guidelines that we want to see on the front of the house so that we can make sure that we're providing, again, that freedom and independence for eating and enjoying that and participating in that event. So I hope this has helped, and I hope that you can look at your food and beverage events a little bit differently when you're doing this. Go through your menus, go through and ask your catering partners, what is on here that's vegan? Can you reconfirm that it's vegan? What on here is gluten-free or nut-free? Or how can we do some things that we're being creative and offering the same options so that we can all come to the event with our full selves, our whole selves, and participate. So this is July 17th. We're halfway through the month that we are celebrating freedom and independence in the United States as well as some other countries. So let's give our attendees that freedom and independence to participate in our events. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, stay safe and eat well.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.